Today we are going to start with an interesting writing skill, that is speech writing. Now I know developing a speech is quite challenging, isn't it? Because listening to one is very easy, but writing one really takes a lot of effort. So let's make it easy today. Let's learn how to write a speech. Let us first begin with the format. Okay. First of all, the length of your speech should be 3/4 to one side of the page. That means if you take one side of a page, you should leave about 5 to 6 lines at the end. That's what you call 3/4 of the page. Or you can finish writing on the entire sheet. You can utilize the whole sheet, but you shouldn't write more than that. Anyways, very long speeches are not very interesting, isn't it? Let's have a look at the next point. Your speech should have 2 to 3 paragraphs. Okay, so they're expecting you to write 2 to 3. Now, what do you mean by that? Generally, you have an introduction, then the body, and then the conclusion. So, how come we can write only 2 paragraphs? You can. If your teacher in school has insisted that you should write 2 paragraphs, then write an introduction, write the body, and the conclusion will be a part of the second paragraph. Okay, but if you're going to keep the conclusion as a separate topic, then it should be 3 paragraphs. Okay, then end your speech formally. Okay, it shouldn't suddenly abruptly feel as if you got bored talking, so now you just want to give it up. No, you should end your speech properly and formally. How are we going to do it? We'll learn a little later, but this is what we should keep in mind when it comes to the format. Now, let's move on to how to develop a speech. Isn't that the most important thing? Now, the first line of your speech, okay, is an address to the audience. That means you're going to talk to the audience, greet them, start, a conversation with them. So this line is very important. Never forget it. This address to the audience could be, respected principal, teachers, and my dear friends, a very good morning to you. But what if you're not giving a speech in school? No problem. Your address to the audience could also be as short as, hello friends, good morning to all of you all. Okay? Now understand that your address to the audience will depend on obviously the audience. If you are in your school, you'll have to greet everybody. Okay? But if you are not in your school and you're giving a speech to any normal audience or anybody at all, then dear friends is more than enough. Then, the next important thing. When you're going to make the introductory paragraph, okay, you can make it interesting by using a few things. What few things are we talking about? Yes. An exclamatory sentence can make your introduction very, very interesting. Asking a rhetorical question is also a very good idea, or an appropriate quotation. Now, why do you have to do all this while you introduce your speech? Very important. In the first 1 or 2 minutes of your speech, people are actually going to decide whether they're going to listen or going to sleep. So your introduction should really be very catchy. Okay, it should really grab the interest of the audience. Now, what do I mean by an exclamatory sentence or a rhetorical question or a appropriate quotation? For example, if I'm giving speech on the occasion of Independence Day, then the exclamatory sentence could be, what a momentous moment it was at 12 o'clock in the night on 15th August 1947. Now that was an exclamatory sentence. Isn't it really making us nostalgic? Whereas if you talk about a rhetorical question, okay, then let that question be anything like, after 6 decades of independence, are we really free today? Now, don't you think that is really a very, interesting question where the audience will be forced to think about what you're talking, so they're automatically with you? Or if you can get an appropriate quotation. Okay, for example, Abraham Lincoln once said, "Freedom is not free." A short quotation, but isn't it really bringing interest to your speech? Right? So these are the 3 ways you can start your speech: exclamatory sentences, using rhetorical question, or using appropriate quotations. You might not get an appropriate quotation for every topic, but the first 2 are very easily found. Okay, now let's go to the next point. Write details in the second paragraph. This is by far the most important paragraph because that's the content, the entire content of your speech. So, what should you do to make this part interesting? Okay, for this, you should understand what is the purpose of your speech. Yes, the purpose of our speech is more often motivating our audience or spreading awareness about something. Okay, that means in order to develop your second paragraph, you are going to try to use sentences that are going to motivate the audience or they are going to spread awareness about something. Okay, so that was your second paragraph. You're supposed to write about 8 to 10 lines of such details. Then coming to the end of your speech, summarize the speech in the third paragraph. Don't add any new points. Okay, so you're not supposed to add any new point, as in nothing new. Whatever has been discussed in the first and second paragraph, you can summarize it in the last part. Or the easiest way out is, if you have written a rhetorical question as an introduction, you can put a quotation or an exclamatory sentence at the end. Okay, and if nothing else, you can end your speech or conclude it with a thank you. Okay, so that is what you just need to do. Put a thank you at the end if you can't think of a very great conclusion, but formally end your speech. Do you remember that was the part of the first few tips that I gave you, that your speech should end formally. Okay, so this was all about how to develop a speech.